We now have the pleasure in welcoming ESPN digital host Arda Ocal onto Hoopsology. How's it going, Arda?
Doing very well. Thank you very much for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
So, Arda, we wanted to have you on the podcast to just discuss a variety of really hot topics, kind of in the digital space. And let's start with NBA Top Shot. This is something that has popped on my radar like 3 weeks ago, and I think ever since then I've just been just obsessed with researching everything about it. And it seems like this is going to be just a thing and a characteristic of the NBA that's going to be sticking around for a while. So I just want to kind of get your story. We're talking off air and how you got involved with NBA Top Shot.
Yeah, I mean, I came into it relatively recently as well. I contribute to many different places at ESPN, and one of those places is Sports Nation. The newly reimagined Sports Nation, which is now on ESPN Plus, is a daily show. Of course, it's a wildly popular brand among many sports fans, and the Twitter account still goes very strong, large presence on social media. But now it's also, again, a daily show, which is on ESPN Plus, and I contribute to it. I guest host as well. And one of the things that I like to do is finding things sort of off the beaten path or things that are emerging. So I do a lot of gaming segments, a lot of esports segments. And really through research and happenstance, I happen to discover NBA Top Shot. And honestly, it has been a wild and amazing ride in learning as much as I can about NFTs. And one thing that I have learned is that this is not new. NBA Top Shot is even not new, relatively speaking. Like the pandemonium and the hoopla surrounding it on a mainstream level is new. But the company has been around for a long time, Dapper Labs behind it, and also has had other projects outside of sports in the crypto space. But NBA Top Shot is really a massive success story for the paradigm shift of NFTs, which will eventually come. So it's a really fascinating thing.
And Arda, can you just explain basically for a newbie, what is NBA Top Shot? And kind of, this is for my own story. I went from like totally dismissing it. This is ridiculous. This is the dumbest thing ever. We can find highlights on YouTube, the typical kind of, opposite opinions of liking it, to all of a sudden just creating an account and wanted to buy my first pack and to be sold out every day. So can you just describe like what exactly it is and why it's, one, I guess, a must for an NBA fan, and two, just why it's relevant in this day and age?
Okay, so at the 101 level,
Sure.
Basically NBA Top Shot are a series of moments. So you buy a pack. A common pack costs $9, for example. So you get 3 moments in that pack. You click a button. It's very similar to opening a pack of cards. You get that same sentiment, that same feeling. You open the pack. It shows you the highlight, and that is called a moment. And that you own. You own the moment. And so you get 3 of them per pack usually, and there are different tiers: common, legendary, cosmic, etc. There's different tiers and different price points. Then what you choose to do with it is up to you. You can collect them, you can keep them, or you can put them up for sale on the marketplace. And that's where you can buy, sell, and trade unique moments. Like everyone, I'm sure many people watching this right now have heard about the $200,000+ sale of the LeBron James dunk that was bought on the Top Shot marketplace. So then the next question, of course, a lot of people have are, well, why are these even valuable in the first place? The analogy that I use, or the comparison that I use, is, why are trading cards popular? Because we grew up knowing trading cards. They always existed, right? They had existed for generations before we were born. But at the end of the day, there's still pieces of paper with a picture on them, right? So what exactly makes them valuable? And the answer is, there are people that are placing importance upon them, right? It's economics, the supply and demand. At the end of the day, people want those cards, and people want to either collect those cards or, lately especially, see them as an investment and want to buy them and resell them. And that's exactly how they see NBA Top Shot. They see a surge in popularity. There is a segment of the audience that are investors that look at this and say, this is a good space for me to make really good money in right now. There might be better investments here than the stock market. I've heard investors say that in the short term. I've also heard people say this is a bubble and it's going to burst. And people have made the comparison to the dot-com bubble in the late 90s and early 2000s, where the internet .com bubble burst, and suddenly companies, that were selling for millions upon millions of dollars were not really doing anything. But what happened after the bubble? What happened was the internet didn't go anywhere. In fact, it got more pivotal in our lives as every year went on. And so what many people are saying as well is that this notion of a digital collectible is here to stay. Whether the bubble of Top Shot bursts or not, or whether the value of the moments decrease over time or it falls off a cliff or whatever, the actual collection of digital goods is here to stay.
Arda, can you explain, you mentioned you get these 3 moments per pack. Is the process, can you compare it to like mining Bitcoin when Bitcoin was getting started? Is that kind of the way, with bit chaining and things like that, that these moments are being made?
So I will say that I'm not an expert in cryptocurrencies and
neither
like
am I.
Intricacies. Yeah. So like I will definitely urge people who want to go into that rabbit hole, understanding ledgers and how blockchains are formed and written, etc. I highly recommend you do your own research on that. What I will say is that this is very similar. Now, this is a process where you can buy and sell these moments by credit card. And you can go on the website, and that's where all the transactions are made, on the NBA Top Shot website. Now, you open a digital wallet, and what that means is basically that's where your collection goes. When you open a pack and when you receive a moment, those moments go into what is called your digital wallet, and that is there for you to look at, to store, to do whatever you want with it, really. And if you choose to sell it on the marketplace, then you go to the marketplace and you place your moment up for sale. And so that's a whole other conversation on like what moments are lucrative and what price points there are, et cetera. But basically, that's how it works at a very 101 basic level. Once you open a moment in your pack, that moment is yours. Now, there might be 10,000 of those moments, but the beauty of it is this whole process and blockchain and crypto in general is very transparent. So you will always know if you go to a marketplace and you look at a LeBron dunk, I'll just keep using that as an example. You will know exactly how many of them there are. That will always be present. 1 of 300, 250 of 300, or 1 of 10,000, whatever, right? You will always know how many exist. You will also know the transaction history and how much each trade went for. And that is in a ledger that you will always be able to see. So already on a digital standpoint, there are advantages over buying physical trading goods, right? Like a lot of this is a paradigm shift. A lot of people are just used to trading cards and they're just like, I don't have any value placed upon digital. But once they hear it more, once they understand it more, it'll slowly seep into their conscience and they'll slowly start to understand. The other benefit of digital goods is there's no wear and tear. I don't have to worry about sending a card to PSA. I don't have to worry about bent edges. I don't have to worry about pen smudges. I don't have to worry about it being lost even. Like it'll always be there on the blockchain. One of the things that Dapper Labs, who's the company that created NBA Top Shot, has been very transparent about is this will operate whether Dapper Labs is involved or not. Like, let's say another similar company gets the NBA agreement in the future. Well, your stuff will still be there. It'll just be another company operating it.
That's a really interesting point, that the stability of the market will always be there. And Arda, I just want to ask you the potential, because this is like the ground floor of just the highlights that are on there. I mean, we're not even talking about legends. We're not even talking about even early 2000s highlights. You've talked to some of the behind the scenes creators of this NBA Top Shot. I mean, what is kind of their rollout and what's kind of in their master plan? Because, we got a league that's constantly creating highlights. I mean, this is kind of a monumental task. I mean, we're starting from now to going back to the history of the league possibly. So what is kind of their intentions, like maybe a year from now, 5 years from now? Have they thought that far?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to peel this in layers of onions because there's actually many layers to this. So the one thing is that the demand surged so much that they have a lot of unique challenges that they have to fix as it pertains to bandwidth on their website, as it pertains to rolling out different features, etc. They were talking about like trades that they can't do right now. They have so many ideas behind the scenes that they are trying to concurrently work on. They even have a game called Hardcourt that they're going to release, which essentially gamifies your moments and turns it into a video game, so to speak. And that's coming out soon too, and that's working concurrently. But they have a lot of fires that they have to put out, like the demand on the website, like how do they deal with the surges? How do they, they have to, they've turned off some features like in the marketplace. People are concerned about withdrawing their money. They have a lot of concerns that are piling up, but they are working on them. I will say that their CEO, Roham, has been very transparent and also very accessible. Like he's on Clubhouse a lot. He's doing a lot of talks. He's very out there answering these questions, and a lot of the company has been as well. So as it pertains to what you asked specifically, I'll do it in layers. So one of the reasons that they have primarily kept to current highlights is because they believe that the demand for historical highlights will be large, and they want to make sure that they'll be able to handle that. Like if they were to release, for example, Jordan highlights, you could see those moments going for 1 million for some people, right? Now, Matt, I know that you have a vested interest in this based on the posters behind you. So the other unique challenge, with Jordan, of course, is the whole IP challenge. It's not necessarily an NBA PA thing, him handling his own IP, etc. So that poses a special challenge. Now, have they had these conversations? Absolutely. Do we have anything on the horizon? They've been very tight-lipped about that. The two areas where they have really identified as sort of the next up is, number one, the WNBA. So that's imminent. I think that's their immediate next project, is they want to make sure that they can roll out WNBA highlights as soon as possible. And there's also a pre-beta website for the UFC. That one is called UFC on Flow. And that right now is at the stage where they're taking surveys. Like I received 2 emails as someone who signed up to the newsletter recently, where one of them said, these are coming soon. The other one was, would you like to take a survey where we can ask you questions about it? And when I talked to the director of partnerships and marketing, Katie Tedman at Dapper Labs, she said, it's conceivable that the UFC on Flow, as it's called, right? Flow is the name of their blockchain. UFC on Flow could possibly roll out by the end of this year. So we don't know exactly the time frames. They don't want to commit to anything like that publicly, but those are the 2 that they're working on right now. But could we see a world where NBA has a bunch of historical highlights? One thing that they did identify was they would like to group them in sort of themes, like maybe best dunks in history or iconic moments in history or, daggers in history, like whatever. I think they have an interest in grouping them in that sort of format, or like, I don't know, the best of 2004 or something like that, as opposed to just releasing a whole season, right? Like making it lucrative in that way. I think that they're very interested in like that supreme type of drop that, creates interest and buzz, right? So that's, I think, the way they're going to go about it. But also one thing that they've said is that they've talked to every major sports league, and they've also talked to a lot of IP. The director of marketing partnerships, Katie Tedman, she said it's about 60-40, 40% sports leagues and 60% IP that I have conversations with. So could we see a world where every major sports league is involved, NFL, NHL, even European League Soccer, whatever the case may be, and also things like Marvel and DC and Star Wars? Absolutely. Like this model could be replicated for any popular IP.
And you mentioned, Arda, about the UFC, and we're a basketball podcast, but I'm also a huge MMA fan, so yeah. I want to ask you about this. The UFC is primarily on pay-per-view, and those highlights are harder to get. Now, they have free fights on YouTube, but the NBA is readily more available. Do you see, once the UFC gets up and going, those top shots, so to speak, whatever they call it, going for more? Because a lot of that is more exclusive to a paywall, either ESPN Plus or on pay-per-view, and a lot of kind of the older history of the UFC is not readily available to just an average person. You have to go on Fight Pass and pay a subscription every month to see it. So do you see even like historical boxing fights from maybe Showtime, HBO? Do you see basically sports highlights that's behind a paywall now, behind a streaming service, being more lucrative than just a regular sports league in which those highlights are more readily available?
Yes. So 2 things there. I did ask about the naming. I don't know if it's going to be called UFC on Flow. They do have ideas to make each one unique. I don't think it's going to be like NHL Top Shot, UFC Top Shot. I think the name will change with each one, but obviously they haven't really come to a conclusion on that yet. But my answer to what you just asked there, Justin, is if there's money, it's going to happen. And here's the secret sauce from a business standpoint from NBA Top Shot, and this will be replicated for every league. The big benefit that the NBA and the Players Association, or every single entity involved in the deal, the big benefit here is that, take trading cards, for example. If I buy a trading card on eBay, let's say I buy a Wayne Gretzky rookie card. If I buy it for $1 million, Wayne Gretzky, the NHL Players Association, the NHL, they don't get a cut of that secondary sale. They got a cut initially when the deal was made and the cards were printed, but not in every secondary sale. On NBA Top Shot, the marketplace is also owned by the company that creates the Top Shot moments. And so every single sale of every moment, if you sell that LeBron James highlight for $200,000 and you sell it 50 times, it gets changed hands 50 times. The NBA Players Association, I don't know the exact arrangement and I don't know the exact percentages, but what I do know is that every single sale, there will be a percentage given to those entities. So if you're telling me that the UFC will have the same benefit from a George St. Pierre knockout or a Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, if that's going to generate revenue each time, then that is only positive for the UFC, and I could absolutely see that happening. And at the end of the day, these are official licensed partnerships, and of course, Dapper Labs is going to ask for those lucrative highlights because that's what the fans will want.
Absolutely. Arda, I wanted to ask, why exactly has the NBA led the way with Top Shot? Is it fanhood from Dapper Labs? Is it like kind of Twitter being a nice medium for us checking out NBA highlights every night? Why is it that NBA is kind of the first major sport in this NFT market?
So there has been other crypto endeavors, like MLB had an MLB crypto example. Some card trading companies have digital card collectibles, like Topps is an example. Brian Windhorst wrote a really good article outlining this on ESPN a couple weeks ago as well. The NBA are traditionally early adopters, and so these conversations were happening years in advance. And so I even asked when I spoke with Katie, I asked, like, what are the conversations like now with leagues versus with the NBA? And she said, yeah, obviously it's different, but the NBA quickly understood what we were trying to do and saw the potential. So if there was ever any league for this to be successful with, it's definitely the NBA, because they are definitely ones that are quick adopters and see the trends often better than other leagues.
Absolutely.
Arda, I wanted to ask you about kind of the opposite side of the coin in terms of just NFTs and just, I guess, NBA Top Shot in general. I had a buddy of mine who's really a big fan of the NBA bring this to my attention, and I had no idea. And I just wanted to see in your research if you come across this in terms of the environmental impact that, I guess, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin has had on the environment in terms of it, causing potential damage in the future. Is that something you came across at all during your research? Is that something that's going to be a factor, or do you think that's maybe overblown? I'm just wondering, because I just came across it just the other night, so I'm very curious to see if this is possibly a problem for the cryptocurrency market, and maybe for the NBA from a public relations standpoint, if this gains traction in the mainstream media.
So two things there. That definitely has been brought up as a concern. I have seen some CEOs or some executives of crypto companies saying the only reason people are outraged over this is because they didn't know that this was the case. But in comparison to other things that they use in their everyday lives, like those are established things that you feel like you need, but also contribute in the same negative way to the environment. So I've heard that argument used by executives in crypto companies. But yes, like there are some alarming or jarring stats out there, like minting one NFT is essentially the same as lighting your house for a day and a half. That I don't quote me on that exactly,
Sure.
but that's along the lines of what it is. Now, certainly this will increase as we get more NFTs minted, as people are really getting into this space, and as more leagues come in. Like, this is certainly going to be amped up. But I personally will endeavor to do more research on this, because I'm curious to see what the response is from the crypto community, especially as the demand grows and as we see more happen. Because I do think that I think the sentiment is that a lot of it is just they were not aware that this was any sort of environmental impact at all, or in terms of energy usage. So I think that that was more surprising than anything. But also, there isn't really much of a comparison being made to other things that we already use, right? And so I'm not an expert to speak in this realm just yet, but I am curious to see how both sides of this sort of proceed in terms of what will no doubt be an increase in NFT usage.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a new frontier. I mean, this is something that, this is starting to come into the mainstream, and not only sports, but music and other things. And I want to ask you, since you also cover esports as well, Matt and I, we've played NBA 2K, one of our favorite video games, and I believe it's my team. Do you have the ability to open, kind of digital trading cards there? Mm-hmm. How does this change like NBA 2K? Because to me, I see that as more valuable. I mean, you're playing as the player in a video game, and those are very lucrative as well, where you have people playing the game, paying, big time money just to get those packs. So do you think, is this a stretch just to kind of correlate this to NBA 2Ks in terms of kind of that digital trading card? Or do you think there's some kind of correlation there possibly?
So actually, I just read an article about how NFT adoption will come through video games. I think video games has been using tokenization for a very long time now. People are very used to collecting and using virtual currency in video games. Fortnite is an amazing example of this, right? Mm-hmm. NBA 2K also, you're collecting, you're changing your avatar. So like this whole idea of digital customization and collection is not a foreign concept to video game players, right? Including
Absolutely.
NBA 2K. Now, one thing that I do find interesting is I was actually listening to a few executives in a clubhouse the other day where they were talking about what the future of video games will be. And they were mentioning how free-to-play really changed the formula for a lot of games. Now, NBA 2K is not the case, of course, but like free-to-play games like Fortnite, like mobile games, really sort of changed the course of a lot of video games and how they monetize. Now, the next wave, according to these people and what people might be predicting, is free to earn and free to own. So imagine a world where an NBA game is free and you're grinding the game and playing the game and getting good at the game. And there are rewards such as you get this unique NFT as a reward for winning a season or playing these games or reaching a certain level. Now, there are obviously hurdles that you have to jump. What does that mean for, like, if you sell this thing for tax purposes? Or, what about people who are not of age to be able to, engage in these kind of things? Like, there are certainly different layers of this. I'm just mentioning what the conversation was here, and it seemed to be very interesting. And honestly, you could certainly envision that once you hear it, you're like, wow, this would actually be something that would be enormous, especially for gamers that love to grind and play and get better and then all of a sudden collect things. But imagine it doesn't stay in the game, right? Even as a collection, imagine everything you amass stays with you. So like you could put it on your digital avatar outside of the game, and it doesn't just like die with the game itself, right? Mm-hmm. So these are things that game developers are thinking about. How long it'll take to implement, I mean, that remains to be seen, honestly. Like crossplay is a relatively new concept, right? Like it took a long time and we're still in an era where that's not fully going to be embraced because, marketing and exclusives, etc., console wars, whatever you want to call them. But like that is a concept that definitely people should keep an eye on, because NFTs could certainly make their way in some way, shape, or form into video games at some point in the future.
Arda, I also want to ask you about this NBA 2K in general, the league. They had their draft, and during the pandemic, that was one of the big forms of, I could say, entertainment, not only for this NBA fans, but just people in general looking for something to watch. Based on that, how do you think the NBA 2K League will, I guess, capitalize that in terms of gaining new fans for this season? And then what you've seen their overall outlook as a league compared to like other video games, like shooters, etc.? How does the NBA 2K League stack up to those leagues?
Well, certainly. I mean, the thing with sports simulators is that it's always going to have the uphill battle of people just wanting to watch the other sport, right? Now, I'm very entertained by NBA 2K League, Madden tournaments. I do play-by-play for the NHL Gaming World Championship, which is the NHL's official esports. So like, I obviously, excuse me, I'm very bullish on sports sim esports. But one thing that a sports exec told me a long time ago that I find to be true or see proof of often is the best esports are ones that are rooted in fantasy and ones that aren't necessarily a simulation of real life, right? Like League of Legends, Call of Duty. You know, these are for most people, at least playing them, a fantasy scenario, right? And so, I feel like we will continue to see growth in esports. NBA 2K is doing a lot of great things. The league is doing a lot of great things. I love the inclusion of Gen G last year. I thought that was a really big move to have an owner in the league that is not one of the NBA teams. I could see a world where every NBA team is involved and esports organizations are involved in non-NBA city teams. Like the Gen G Tigers represent Shanghai, which I think is a really great move. And then that could make it a more global outfit. You could see one day when the pandemic is over, maybe there's a European league or a world conference and a NBA conference, so to speak, where the teams play and then they come together or whatnot for a world championship in NBA 2K. Like that could absolutely happen. And this is also a good conduit to grow the game in certain areas. Like, could we have a team in India? Could we have a team in other countries in Europe? And could esports organizations be at the helm of that, just like Gen G was with Shanghai? So I think that that's a really great proposition. I think that the leadership there are doing great things. And yeah, I mean, in esports in general, we're seeing a lot of creativity. We're seeing a lot of boom in esports, and that will only continue. The one thing I will say is that people often confuse esports and general gaming. Like, gaming is still a massive juggernaut as compared to esports, right? Like, esports might generate, let's say, $1 billion in revenue, which is impressive in itself, but gaming does like 9 figures, you know, or like hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue, which, so esports, and even for major organizations, often esports is a small percentage of their actual revenues, whether it's lifestyle products or streaming or content, etc.
Oh, go ahead, man.
I just wanted to get your thoughts, kind of more broadly speaking, you know, with lots of sports leagues, and I think mostly with schedule changes, obviously with the pandemic and things like that. You know, we saw ratings drop, pretty much across the board. And again, I think that was scheduling being different and different focuses for individuals, you know, a lot bigger things going on, obviously, with esports specifically, just generally speaking, not just limited to 2K. Was it similar to those types of trends, or you mentioned the kind of continued success of gaming and esports? Was that something that was unique? Did it boom a little bit more with the pandemic situation we all have been in?
So I don't have any numbers in terms of if people sort of, you know, when sports went away, if there were people that flocked to esports. I will say that it was a huge task for esports leagues to actually pivot and try to organize themselves during the pandemic. Like League of Legends and Call of Duty League were 2 great examples of Rocket League as well, actually. Well, even Overwatch. I mean, all of the leagues that operated, but like I'm using League of Legends and Call of Duty League because they had a really big spotlight on them. And they did some pretty unique things this year. Like League of Legends held their world championship behind closed doors in Shanghai, except for the final that had a very limited audience. So, but they kept the lights on, and they, you know, took a break as they had to. And then when it was safe to do so, they pivoted to online. And for Call of Duty League especially, that could have been a crushing blow for them, because I know that, like, going to home series events, there was some really great events that they were putting on, and they were ready to have some really, really great events coming up, especially Chicago, for example. They'd sold out their tickets in minutes, and there was like a massive hype in the city. And then the pandemic hit, and so that none of that could happen. And of course, it's a different vibe when there's no fans in the audience, as we know, watching all the sports that we have, literally seeing the NBA crown its champion in a bubble also, right? So, but I think that the leagues should be commended, sports and esports, for continuing on. And in particular with esports, they continued their regular seasons pivoting online, which brought in new challenges. There are different challenges presenting online than on LAN or in person. So I'm not sure about the actual viewership and how it compared. I do know that CDL and League of Legends were very happy with their numbers when I asked about it. And they were very comparable or even up as compared to previous years. I will say one thing. One of the founders of Riot Games who created League of Legends, his name is Mark Merrill. One thing he told me in an interview was, if not for the pandemic, League of Legends esports overall would have been profitable for its first year ever. So that just to show you, some of the leagues have been profitable in the League of Legends ecosystem, but I mean overall, it would have been profitable for the first time ever, which is saying something. So the pandemic really derailed the best of plans.
What do you see as the future of esports? Because to me, Arda, it kind of reminds me of the rise of the UFC in terms of a lot of misconceptions, a lot of people making early judgments, a lot of just I guess hatred for no reason. And then eventually you saw the UFC become mainstream, and now it's on ESPN, and you don't hear too much about controversies or everything. People just accept it. So I think with esports, it seems to be some hesitancy in terms of maybe different demographics. I think younger demographics fully understand it perfectly. It's just part of their lives. But in terms of just crossing over to get those new new viewers, new eyeballs on it, do you think with esports that's even necessary to even get kind of a broader audience, that people that may not even play video games to watch, compared to the UFC, where that was a thing where people didn't even heard of mixed martial arts, they got into it? And I just think with esports, it has its own kind of integrated fan base. I just want to ask you, from somebody who's just a casual fan at best, do you think with esports in general, are they going to be catering to those kind of non-fans to grow the fan base, or do you think they're kind of find where they're at in terms of their own space online?
Yeah, I don't think they need to. I think that they have a fan base that will just organically grow, and I think that they cater to them very well. This is one of the questions that I always heard, this is adjacent to what you just asked there, but there's a big conversation about esports getting into the Olympics. And this does make sense in the context of what you just asked. So I'm going to tell the story. So
sure. There's
always this conversation about, we need esports to be recognized in institutions like the Olympics, which is mainstream. That would give us that would give esports so much credibility. It would give esports a shot in the arm, and more people would be privy to it or see it for what it really is. And actually, before the 2020 games, before the pandemic, there was going to be an Intel event that was really a precursor to. It was almost like a pre-show to the Olympics, and Rocket League and Street Fighter were going to be events at that. Which was really seen as sort of the launch pad, sort of the soft introduction to esports at the Olympics, which may be in several years. I know that there's backlash in the IOC and sort of concerns, etc., but eventually it's going to get there once it becomes popular enough or recognized and established enough. I think it's just a time thing. But the other side of it was a lot of executives that I was talking to was saying, why does esports need the Olympics? Why is this such a milestone to people? Why do people care? Because if anything, the Olympics need us. Entities need us, because we are the ones that are catering to the younger audience that so many people covet. So why are we trying to chase after these, mythical brass rings or milestones or accomplishments, so to speak, achievements, when we should be the achievement? We are the ones that are ushering in the new generation. So what is it about them that we care about so much? What are we going to gain overall? They will gain from us. So that is definitely a sort of camps conversation sort of thing. And I do think that it's a time. Going back to your question, I think it's just time. I think that people are starting to warm up to it. I don't think that it's a what is this esports thing anymore. I think it's more people are understanding what it is, and now they're just making decisions on whether they want to pursue it or not. But I do know that a lot of brands are just normalizing having conversations with esports entities, because they know that will reach them an audience that they covet, a younger audience that they want to cater to for many, many brands. And you see a lot of activations being the case, and that's only going to continue.
Thank you very much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. just keep schooling us on NBA Top Shot. I'm sure a year from now, this is going to be probably the hottest thing in the league, if not really on fire already. Please, Arda, let our viewers and listeners know where we can find you on social media, and then what other projects and things you're up to during this year.
Yeah, so I contribute to a lot of places at ESPN, of course. You can see me on Sports Nation. You can see me on SportsCenter on Snapchat. If you're a hockey fan, I host In the Crease on ESPN+. And you can just follow me at Arda. If you're a Raptors fan, please announce yourself to me on Twitter. I'll be happy to engage with you. Or if you were a Knicks fan watching MSG Networks for the last several years and happened to see me on a 150, I appreciate that too. But no, yeah, just follow me on at Arda, ARDA on Twitter, and I usually respond to people that send me messages. So, yeah, I appreciate being on the podcast. This was fun.
Awesome, Arda. Thank you very much for joining us.